So with this unusual way of production, how did you keep it all straight? I mean, did you ever get to see the schedule and the...
We didn't keep it straight. I mean, you know, you'd have glitches because you'd shoot things sometimes at the beginning of, you know, you'd start work maybe in May, and come November, you could have grown 2 inches as a kid, you know, although I didn't have that problem. But other people, or even if you gained weight, or your hair was slightly different, or, you know, or you had a zit on your nose and you didn't in the master shot. Now you've got, you know, you got to cover all that stuff up. And a lot of times, you know, if you look closely, sometimes there'll just be little mistakes, like the tabs maybe, you know, were in a 2-shot. You know, maybe they got your 2-shot because you were with Fred, you know, in June, and then they got your close-up in October, and you didn't button it. So it's like there, it's tied, and next thing it's up, and it's tied, and it's up, and it's, you know, if they intercut those together, you'd see odd little things like that, you know. Most people didn't care.
Did you have rules like couldn't cut your hair, things like that?
Oh, it was absolute, yeah. They had, you know, you had to have the same haircut, you know, all year long, same length. You know, you do some scenes where even in a master where Fred happened to walk out of the scene in the middle of this scene that should continue normally, even though the actors walked out, they'd say cut, and a still guy, a cameraman with a Polaroid would come in, they go freeze, boom, and they take your picture, and, you know, whatever position you were in, you would then, when they'd go back in a few months to catch the tail end of a master shot, you'd have to, you know, get in that, you'd look at the picture and go, oh, I have my hands here, or whatever, and then you'd do that, and they would start the scene, you know, resuming action that way.
Wow, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah, I don't know if they'll ever do another show like that, you know. That was, you tell that to people today, and they just, you know, producers, directors, writers, they go, oh my God, you know, I did 2.5 Men a few years ago, and they said, whatever you do, don't tell Charlie. Don't tell Charlie that's how you shot, because they're going. That's the way he's going to want to do it too, so he can be here as little as possible.
That's great. So, with this unusual way of shooting, did you rehearse at all?
Well, in those, you know, you would do a standard kind of go in, block the, you know, initial kind of walk through and block it for camera, and then you'd leave, they'd light it, and then you'd come back and rehearse it maybe 1 or 2 times just to get it smooth, and then you'd shoot it. And that was this. Yeah, the routine.
Talk a little bit about working with Don Feddersen.
Yeah, he was not a real, you know, you knew he was the uber, you know, guy who was always the head dude and calling shots, but he was pretty much invisible, you know. You'd see him at the beginning of the year, and he'd come down the first day of shooting and pop in somewhere, you know, 3 months later. But unless there was some really radical problem, you know, I you know, didn't have a whole lot to do with him. You know, he was there. He was always on the lot. I'd see him occasionally, but not like he was involved in day-to-day shooting at all.
What about George Tibbles or Gene Reynolds? Did you have interaction with them?
Well, they were intimately involved. They were producing the show, and Gene was our director for a few years. I mean, my absolute favorite role model person I loved was Fred DeCordova. Fred, you know, took me under his wing, and Fred is a legend in this town, in this business, just predating My Three Sons. He was already, you know, an uber producer director. Did with Jack Benny. George Burns did both of their shows. Ronald Reagan was one of his best friends. I think he directed Bedtime for Bonzo, maybe. But Fred was one of the most articulate, most witty, acerbic, fastest lightning wit that you will ever encounter, and would cut people to ribbons with his tongue. I mean, he had that kind of, he just didn't care. He was the only person I ever saw McMurray, sort of, and he would not spare McMurray. Everyone was intimidated by Fred, because, you know, Fred was a quiet kind of a guy, but you felt that he was the guy who really controlled, you know, what was happening, set the tone on the set, except when Fred was there, DeCordova, you know, was setting the tone. And I think McMurray knew who DeCordova was. They were peers, you know. I mean, he was a giant in the industry, and and in the whole social world of Hollywood, DeCordova was, hanging out with the top people in the business. So, he was the right guy. And then, of course, that's why he was hired by Johnny Carson to be his producer for 20 years, is that Fred knew everybody in the world, and DeCordova, that is, and he also was not intimidated by anyone. But Fred, I absolutely adored Fred, and Fred, would take me to baseball games with Jack Benny, and, and I'd hang out with Fred every night. We'd go watch, the dailies together. He'd, have his drink. I'd have some kind of drink as well. And he's just, a great companion, just a great guy.
What did he see in you to want to spend so much time with you?
Because I just wanted to be exactly like him to a fault. I mean, I had a pretty sharp wit, and I, was given full encouragement to use it, to probably the point that it became kind of obnoxious. I mean, honestly, because Fred could be obnoxious, and a lot of people didn't like DeCordova because he would say things to people that would make them put them down, in some ways. I mean, because he was. But it would be very funny if you heard it. You'd go, "Wow, this guy's incredible. He's so funny." But I became, I molded myself in his image as best as I could, because I thought he was hysterically funny. Everything, about him was funny, and he was just a very charismatic man. And so, Fred loved that, and Fred introduced me to all of his people, Lee Marvin and Jack Lemmon, and all the people. We'd go over to their sets and hang out and smoke cigars and whatever.
That's great. So now you went to school on the set. Tell us a little bit about that, how that worked.
Yeah, it's a standard 3 hours a day. That was mandated by law. You'd have to get in 3 hours. You could do it all at once from noon to 9 to noon. You'd be done, or you could start at 9 o'clock and get 10 minutes here, 20 minutes there, half an hour here, 45 minutes there. If it all totaled by 4 o'clock in the afternoon, 3 hours, you were done. So, but it had to be 3 hours a day. And it was just, me and Stan in the beginning, and then Stan graduated, and then it was just me and Dodie. And so, that was the whole student body. Yeah.
And did it affect your work to be going back and forth to the school?
You mean public school? Going back?
I mean on the set, did it, interrupting scenes to go to school or vice versa?
I'm sure it did, I guess. I don't know. I mean, maybe there was some benefit in having to, instead of pounding your head, on the desk there going, I'm never going to get algebra. You'd work at it, and you'd go away and do something else and come back and then try to focus on it, whatever it was, or learning Spanish. And, I don't know. I mean, I never went to college. I don't know if I can. Maybe that's why, kind of a fractured concentration. But, it was the way you had to do it, so you had no choice.
And what was it like for you going back to public school?
That was to be expected. It was a little a slap in the face of reality, because you're on a set and you're with adults and they all treat you like, you're a little prince, and if you sneeze, 8 people hand you a Kleenex, and because they don't want you to slow the schedule down. Not necessarily because they're so concerned that you feel bad. They just didn't want the schedule getting messed up. So back in school, you're in the jungle, man. You're back with the natives, and it's a tough grind for anybody. There's that whole pecking order of there's the cool people, the socias, and then there's, the geeks, and there's the middle nerdier type of people, and then there was the outcasts, the real losers. And so, you had to learn how to traverse your way through that very perilous place to grow up. And, of course, being, walking around as Ernie, you felt like you had a target on your back sometimes because, kids don't know how to react. Some want to be your friend. Some want to be your friend too much, that makes you kind of leery. Some just can't stand the sight of you because they hate you and they hate your show, and they don't know you, but they hate Ernie. So you're constantly kind of dodging bullets and trying to make friends.
Did you ever fit in? Did you ever do it?
Once I found my peer group, then that kind of, like most kids, that's your safety net. That's how you sort of survive school, is you get some kind of a strength in numbers, and you sort of muddle through it. But it was a challenge, and I mean, I'm so glad I did it. I could have gone to a professional school, which would have been a disaster, I'm sure, because I got my fair licks and had to defend myself and learn about a lot of issues of asking girls out for dates and getting rejected every time, and finally getting lucky and maybe getting a date here and there, and I never was comfortable with being, the celebrity. I just didn't feel comfortable, you playing the fame card. Some guys maybe could do it, and it worked to their advantage. I never figured that out, so I never did it.
So let's talk a little bit about the cast. I mean, you've talked about Fred MacMurray and the production element of it, but talk about working with Fred MacMurray.
Yeah, well, I mean, he was again a big star. Had a long established career before he came to Three Sons, and his whole lifestyle was pretty much set. I think he had come to Sons in a time of his life. He wanted to settle down, and he had just adopted a couple of twin girls and was married to June Haver and wanted that idyllic family life in addition to still act. So it wasn't a familial at all. It wasn't like we were invited to barbecues at his house or come out, go play golf with me, or I'll show you how to fly fish, or we would show up, we'd work, we'd do our scenes. He'd be very nice, cordial, polite, and didn't involve himself much in my personal life, or so it was like you were the junior partner in a very prestigious law firm, and he was the head lawyer.
Talk about working with Don Grady.
Well, Don was another great role model, because Don was a musician. Don introduced Stan and I both to guitar and music, because he was a musician. Coming from the Mickey Mouse Club, he could play that's how he got on there. He could play drums, trumpet, guitar, piano, accordion, whatever you needed. He could do it. And Don used to have his dressing room right over our schoolroom, so you'd hear him up there composing music all day long. And you're down there trying to learn trigonometry or something, and he's up there, pounding away. But as just a guy who is older than you, and you go, wow, he's a cool guy. He's really was very fun to be around, and always had a joke, and always was shared his knowledge and love of music with us, and to this day, and probably that's why I like music and play guitar and a lot of things that he shared with us that were great.
Talk about working with William Frawley.
Well, Frawley was already world famous as Fred Mertz from I Love Lucy, and Lucy loved Bill because he was another real body, just total no censor whatsoever. Said anything and everything that came to his mind, and usually peppered with a lot of four-letter words, which when you're 8, 12, 15 years old, you go, it's great, love it. You just fall down laughing. Of course, then that only encouraged him more to do that, and he was a big drinker, and that was our job, was to get him back to the set after lunch, because we would all go to a restaurant near the studio called Nicodell's, and it was kind of the haunt where all the studio people would go, because they didn't serve booze on the lot. Hey, if you wanted to drink, you'd have to go off. I'll tell you a funny story after this, though. But anyway, so the producer said, well, if he's not back on time, we're losing, thousands by the minute, and nobody could get Bill back to the set. Once he started drinking, they'd send over some assistant or some young kid and go, Mr. Frawley, and he'd go, get out of my face, and they'd go, oh, whatever, okay. So they said to us, look, can you help? When it's time to go back, get Bill to bring him back, So, that was our job, is, everyone would leave the table, because there would be 10 or 12 people go to lunch, and there'd just be Bill at the end, and at Nicodell's, and having his fourth Cutty Sark or whatever, and and then he'd go, well, come on, Uncle Bill, we got to go back to. Whoa, no, I'm not going back. I haven't had my cantaloupe yet. No, we got to go back. Let's. No, my drink, but we got to go back. It's all right. Leave me alone. Let's go back to the salt mine. Come on, what are we waiting for? And So, we were unofficially the Bill Frawley Retrievers, my brother and I. But he was, just a funny guy, bachelor. But years later, this is just not too long ago, I inducted Bill Frawley and and Vivian Vance into the Television Hall of Fame. And Michael Eisner, who was also being inducted that night, got up because he heard my story talking about Frawley and how we had to get him and everyone back from Nicodels. And he said, when I became the head of Paramount, the first thing that I said is we got to improve the food at our commissary because everybody goes to that damn Nicodels and they come back drunk as skunks and we're losing money. He said the food sucks here. In addition to the food being better there, let's shut that place down and have a better commissary, which I thought was very, very funny because it was true. I mean, the food at the commissary was horrible, so the incentive to go to the other place was pretty good. Plus, if you wanted to drink, but he said the main reason everyone came back so drunk, the technicians, the actors, everyone come back. So he said that was my first edict. Let's get the commissary fixed, okay?
That's great. Talk about working with William Demarest.
Yeah, he was like, Frawley after rehab. The fun had just been drained out of him. He was similar in that they were both hard nut guys that grew up in the Depression and took no guff and spoke with their fists or whatever in the old days. But he was a teetotaler by then, and he just didn't have the same kind of sparkle that Frawley had. He was still a great guy and a very fun actor, but just on a personal level, he seemed like, a guy who needed a drink. He was just a little too edgy, a little bit grouchier. Frawley was grouchy, but, you knew some of it was manufactured for everyone's amusement, where Demarest was just grouchy, I mean, but not to the point you'd go, I can't stand being around him. But you couldn't help but compare the two because they were playing the same roles and both similar. They were competitors. That was apparently, I didn't sense it, I didn't recognize it, but people have told me that it was very hard for Frawley to accept the fact that Demarest was inheriting his role because they didn't like each other, and there was a moment that their paths crossed, I think crossed on the one day that Frawley was saying goodbye and going back to Ireland or whatever the story was, and Demarest was just got off the Singapore Express and was coming to live with the Douglases now as the new nanny, and I don't think that was the most pleasant day.
You only worked with Tim Considine a few episodes before you sort of replaced him, but talk about working with him.
Well, Tim again was another role model. Tim was the oldest, and used to love Considine, and still do. He was. You want to wait for that? Does that matter? Doesn't matter. Okay. Yeah. Good. Okay. Yeah. No, Tim Considine was a great role model. He was loved race cars. To this day, that's what he does for a living. Is he writes for car magazines like Car and Driver and Motor Trend and tests all the brand new cars that come out. And so and he was in the thick of Hollywood. Considine he actually came into the show at McMurray's urging because there was another child actor of that era called Bobby Diamond. I'm sorry, it wasn't Bobby, it was Ryan O'Neal. And Ryan O'Neal was cast as one of the sons, and they didn't, I'm mixing it. Ryan O'Neal was playing the role of Robbie, and Ryan O'Neal, McMurray didn't think was very, very good at comedy, so they let him go. And then they hired Don. But in terms of Considine, it was, I think, Bobby Diamond couldn't come to terms. They wanted him, and I think he was on Fury, another TV show. And they wanted him to be the oldest son, and he wanted a whole bunch of money. And then McMurray had worked with Tim on Follow Me Boys, and I think it was at McMurray's urging that they brought Tim Considine in as the oldest son, Mike.
So why did he leave?
Why did he leave? Well, I'm sure his version might be different than mine. I think he had a spat with. He wanted to direct. frankly. He really wanted to direct, and he did. They allowed him to direct a couple episodes, maybe one or two, at least one. And that was a very unnatural thing, because the way we shot out of order. We never shot, a show would start on Monday, finish it by Friday. It was, like I said, weeks would go by, and you'd be shooting scenes out of that to accommodate McMurray. But I think they ceded to his request to go, I want to be a director. Can I do one of these? And so they did. He did one, and I think at the next season his contract was up, and he said, I want to be the director. I want to either do more. I want to be the director all year long. And I don't think McMurray wanted that. I mean, he went, gave the kid a shot, but I'm not going to take directions from one of my boys. That may be inaccurate, maybe partially true. I don't know. One way or the other, Tim had that desire, and I don't think that they wanted to go there. For maybe that wasn't the real reason, maybe it was, but that's what I heard. And in any case, they said, well, we can't do that for you. So, we'll have to replace you. I said, okay, great. Bye.
And you got your big break.
And he got his big break into Patton, I think was his next film, where he was the soldier who was slapped. And that was the end of his career, unfortunately. Acting, anyway.
What was the general atmosphere like on the set?
Tense, like Oswald in Ghosts. No, it was very calm, very just like McMurray. It was very, very, he sets the tone. The star always sets a tone. If you got a real uppity, prima donna diva, that's the way the set goes. It's everyone's on edge and everyone's trying to walk on eggshells and not upset. But McMurray was, let's keep it on the low key, and everybody does their job, and everyone, goes home, and I go home at 5 o'clock, and that's the way it works. And so, no egos, very little drama. It was great.
Was it different at all when he wasn't on the set?
Well, that's when the drugs and all the alcohol started flowing. It was a perfect opportunity to party. No, it was not at all. It was pretty much the same, maybe a little looser, maybe a little bit, but not like we flew out of control and like now that the cat's away, the mice will play. We got on with our job, did it, and it was. When McMurray came back at the end of the year, we just fell right in.
In later seasons, there was the addition of 3 female characters.
Yeah.
So talk about how that impacted the show.
Well, it changed it. It really changed the fundamental premise of the show, and they had to, because they were just trying to resuscitate the patient. What drug can we give this corpse now to keep it moving for another season or two? And it was. The cameraman's wincing when I said corpse. Sorry. No, it was a show that had a long 12-year run, and you go, what are you going to do to make it more interesting? And of course, all the boys were getting older, and the storyline seemed a little sillier. That you just didn't have the same kind of variety. That we were all kind of late teens. So, Robbie got married, and that was a new wrinkle in this all-male household. And then, Fred got married to Beverly Garland, and then the triplets came, and so it was I think just like I say, and they just were trying to find ways to keep the show somewhat interesting, But again, the strength of the show was always the novelty of an all-male household. Today we'd all be gay or something. I don't know what they would do. It'd still be all male, but I don't know.
Were you surprised at how fans reacted to you while you were on the show?
Well, it became a little more, when in the early years, it was odd. Like I say, I was not a real big fan of being pointed at and grabbed at, and that always kind of disturbed me. And then it became a little even more disturbing on another level as I got to be an older teenager, and I'd go back to public school and see what my peers, not necessarily the peers in L.A. and the kids, what we were doing here, maybe wasn't quite what was happening in Peoria or Wichita or in the Midwest. But there was a whole other kind of reality that I was looking at, and I became, I was still Ernie, and which was odd because, I was the poster boy for the establishment. That's what My Three Sons was perceived as in the late 60s, it's a big lie. Problems can't be solved in a half an hour every week, week in and week out. Life's more complicated and difficult and challenging, and you're presenting this unrealistic expectations that families should be like this. And, of course, and I was going to go back to school and go, wow, it's way different than life as we're portraying it. So, that part of it being that kind of, the face of normality, and I knew I wasn't really deep down. I mean, that was a little bit of a schism, and kind of, I grew my hair as quick as I could. I was eating gelatin and anything. What makes your hair grow fast? Because I wanted to look like the Beatles. I didn't want to look like Ernie anymore. I didn't want to look like Mo Howard. I want to be, George Harrison, because that's where my life really was. There was this alternate reality that was being projected on television as My Three Sons. But again, it was becoming quite obvious that what we were putting out there as a television series, as a depiction of, American life, was not like what was happening in the rest of the world, in particular here in Los Angeles.
What do you think was the appeal of the show? Why do you think it lasted as long as it did?
Well, people get comfortable with characters, I mean, and people liked that family. And again, they liked the initial concept of, of how the family functioned. It was like every girl, wanted to coddle the boys, and every guy wanted to be part of that fraternity. It was like the Animal House. It was a great club. If you're a guy, you'd go, wow, that's what I want to be. No girls bugging everyone. And then the girls all go, oh, they're so sweet. I'd like to take care of them. And so, there was some of that, and it was funny. I mean, it was good writing. The nuts and bolts of it all were that essentially they struck on a formula and they knew how to deliver it. And very good, excellent group of writers. Danny Simon wrote a bunch of them, and Peter Tewksbury, and some people that went on to have some pretty big careers later, in either film or other series. It all was a very well constructed vehicle.
Was there pressure on you to be a role model?
Me?
Yeah.
Being a role model? No, I don't know. I don't think so. I mean, nobody put pressure on me to be Ernie. I just sort of fell into that. No, I don't know if Ernie was a role model. I don't, I mean, again, I sort of knew I was representative of people that were not normal, or not the classic kind of. Because you'd get fan mail and you'd go, you'd see my kid looks just like you, and kid with like eyes crossed like this and hair sticking straight up, big old, Deliverance kind of ears. I'm going, great. That's no wonder I'm not getting laid. But no, it was just, that's who you are. So it's hard to distinguish between your, what you're putting out there, and it's not manufactured or like a character that I'm trying to come up with. It sort of was, just what I was.
Did you do a lot of promotion for the show?
No, they never did. No, oddly enough, we had not like Family Affair, which was another Don Feddersen series where they had all kinds of merchandising, Mrs. Beasley and all this other stuff. No, we never hardly ever did any PR. Some of it might have been my parents. I think I think Don Grady and Tina Cole, they'd go on some PR junkets. My parents wanted me to have as normal of a childhood as they could, given all of the other things that being on TV. And I know they turned down a lot of projects, film, acting, things that I could have done, because they wanted me to just experience real school and in the real world. So we didn't. Stan and I we always complained about it. We thought, it'd be fun to go to Hawaii and do some, let's go around the world, let's do some things. But we never went anywhere.
Did you watch the show with your family?
In the beginning. 12 years of it was enough. I mean, it was sort of, if there was an episode that you thought maybe was, when you were filming it, you thought was kind of fun to do, you might want to check it out. But It wasn't like, let's, it's 9 o'clock on Thursday, let's turn on Miami Sons. No.
Was there ever a time during the 12-year run that you thought about leaving?
No, I don't think so. No, I mean, desiring and starting to get older and mature and wondering what you're going to do with your life, I started thinking maybe some other acting opportunities and challenges would be fun, just to see what would happen, because I had a career before My Three Sons, so it wasn't like that was the only thing I'd ever done. So and again, the movies and television and things by the late 60s, there was The Graduate, Midnight Cowboy, and Easy Rider, and all these new kind of things that were very appealing to me as a Barry, as a person, as an actor, started to look pretty interesting. And I went, I think I'd kind of like to do that than maybe just worry about if I lost my skateboard or I couldn't get a date to the prom or, whatever kind of manufactured problem that seemed pretty inconsequential. I thought it'd be fun to do something like that. So that part of it was looking beyond My Three Sons, but I never went, oh, I'm done with this. I'm leaving.
Do you have a favorite episode?
Well, I like the one with the lion. The lion kind of got in the house, but that was just because I got to work with a lion, not like it was any great acting challenge. Just they brought a lion to the set, and that was fun. And probably the ones where they brought the character into the family, the arc of shows that Ernie was adopted. And, I mean, I look at them now occasionally, and I go, some of those are pretty dramatic, different tone, maybe a little slightly from most of the shows. Yeah.
One of the fan favorite episodes is Ernie and Zsa Zsa. Can you talk about working with Zsa Zsa Gabor?
Again, you're talking about a diva who sort of was a whole other, like a alien sort of landed on our soundstage, and I was like, who's this? I mean, I know who she was, but absolutely zero connection with her as a person. Just going, whatever. She, it's got all these jewels, it's got that funny dialect, and and she was kind of aloof and remote, and I went, okay, that's Zsa Zsa. But I knew nothing about her really as the real Zsa Zsa. Does anyone really know the real Zsa Zsa? I don't know. I'll have to ask Asia or whatever daughters, or Eva, I guess, her sister.
Another fan favorite is First Night Out. You filmed it with Rosemarie. Can you
Really?
talk a little bit? Do you remember that episode?
No, thanks for telling me. Yeah. Don't remember that.
Don't remember
much.
that one?
Don't remember that. I remember that she did the show, but I don't remember working with her much.
So why did the show come to an end? Did it finally just run its course?
It just, through. I mean, they exhausted. I think the novelty was gone. We're all getting older. It was all kind of everything that you could have possibly done with that premise had been done. The show was still popular enough to actually probably have gone on another season. Technically, there was a change in the laws that the networks, they were breaking up the antitrust laws, which I don't think should have been done, but they did it, and where a network could now own their product. At that era and that preceding that, networks couldn't own. They'd have to be, independent producers would come to them with a product, and that independent producer would own that product, and they would come to some kind of a license agreement. So in that era, what happened was the networks were allowed to own one show and distribute. And in fact, they actually owned Gunsmoke and My Three Sons. So they had to make a decision, and they chose Gunsmoke, mainly because I'd heard William Paley's wife liked Gunsmoke. Had nothing to do with, which show was better or McMurray. She just liked Gunsmoke, and that's how a decision was made, because the network had his wife liked Gunsmoke.
Did the show have a true finale episode?
No, and even the final day party, it was pretty like, oh, I'm so tired. I'm ready to move on. I don't know, how about you? Yeah, 12 years, and McMurray, it's probably early 60s, which is not that old anymore, because I'm kind of veering in that area. I think he just went, enough's enough. People are now just kind of tuning in because want to see what we look like, how old we're getting, and Don Grady had already left the show. He wasn't there in the last year. Mike, like I said, God, he could have fell off a cliff in Hawaii. Nobody ever talked about him anymore. Frawley was gone. Demarest was 82 or 3 years old, having difficulty memorizing his lines. I was the only son living at home. So it really wasn't My Three Sons anymore even. The whole show revolved around the sons and Dad, their relationship with Dad. And all the boys had, either vanished into a jungle or they were married living somewhere outside of the house. So, yeah, the whole idea of the show had changed so radically from what it really was in the beginning.
Talk a little bit about the residual deal you signed when the show ended.
What residual deal? There are no residual deal. That is the deal that we signed. It actually was very good for probably, show went off in 72, came out in 60, so 12 years. And then till around the mid-'80s, it was in syndication and, very great residuals. But then a little thing called cable was invented. And producers very kind of cleverly went, well, that's a whole new distribution. That's a whole new way to distribute things, which is kind of like what's happened with the internet. And they go, oh, all bets are off. All those old contracts that you signed don't matter anymore because this is a new medium, a new way to deliver the product. So, and then at the same time, they came up with an idea that the networks were now buying product and owning it. And what happened was Viacom was buying everything and then creating networks like Nickelodeon and TV Land. So they owned it and were licensing it to themselves for $0, $1, whatever it was. So any residuals that you might have gotten just vanished. Yeah.
What do you think is the legacy of My Three Sons?
Well, it was it had its time and place. It was again, it was a stepping stone in its early days from the Father Knows Best, this really plastic kind of world that was America, of the husband wearing a tie to dinner every night and the children all being perfectly mannered and the wife, with aprons and hair bouffant and, to sort of a slightly dysfunctional, disorderly, contentious little house. And I think when America first saw that in the early 60s, went, that's kind of like us, that's more like us than the other people. So that part of it was actually very, had its place in the whole evolution of TV family reality. And so, and then it just evolved into, somewhat naturally into its areas that it went. But, and it's just, it's still being rediscovered today. It's Me TV shows it. And I get people that come up and go, there's nothing else on TV that I can sit and watch with my family, and my kids love it. I like to watch it for nostalgic reasons, but, my kids love Ernie, It's great. And then they go, he's Ernie. And they go, huh? Him? Ernie? Really? Okay. And they always go, oh, yeah, he's got the same voice. His voice is the same. That's it.
So My Three Sons ends, and then what? What were you hoping, what kind of roles were you hoping to get after that?
More dramatic, just to test out your acting chops. And I, kind of was lucky. I got a lot of really nice parts. Ironside and Streets of San Francisco, playing runaways and warped kind of paraplegic guy chasing, some obsessed with the girl in Ironside. And and did another television series called Sons and Daughters, and worked with Richard Donner, who's went on to do all the Superman, Omen, and all those. Went and worked on Broadway. I always had a stage fixation, and I read a book called Goodnight, Sweet Prince about John Barrymore, and I just kind of fell in love with him and that whole idea of stage, and so I had that as an aspiration, and was very lucky. Kind of went to New York, got in a big Broadway play, and did some work off Broadway, and I wanted to become an actor. My parents were very clear that if if this is what you're going to do, if you're not going to go to college, if you're not going to do some other, you really got to, you want to pursue acting, you better take it serious and go study with really good people. And in fact, I did a TV movie called The Elevator, which was a great movie, actually, and a great cast. Myrna Loy and Teresa Wright and Roddy McDowell. And Roddy, of course, was one of the great child stars of his generation. And so I asked him, because he had transferred into a pretty great career as an adult actor. And I said, well, what'd you do? And he said, well, I went to New York, became an actor. That's what you do. You grow up as a person. You grow up as an artist, maybe, And so that appealed to me. So I took his advice and went there, and I studied with some very good Martin Landau and a guy named Jack Garfine, and met, a lot of the people through the actor studio, and it kind of solidified what I wanted to do and how I wanted to approach my craft, and it's lucky.
All right, so let's go back and talk about a couple of those projects that you mentioned. In '73, you were actually in You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown. So was that your first role after Ernie?
It was, yeah.
So how did that feel to be doing something totally different?
Well, it was, yeah. It was. It felt great because it was a big hit off Broadway, and Hallmark Hall of Fame was going to produce the play, and it was a musical. So it was a challenge. I had to sing and dance, and had a couple big solo numbers. My Blanket and Me. I played Linus. And it was a challenge because I just recently worked on Jersey Boys, and I was talking to one of the guys who's playing one of the 4 seasons in it, and he said, all the other guys who are in the film are seasoned. The guy who won the Tony Award, for playing Frankie Valli, he's in it, and the 2 other guys. He said, I'm the only guy who never. I don't sing, I don't dance, but I'm playing one of the 4 seasons. I said, well, that's funny, because when I did You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown, very different, I get it, but I had never done the play before, and everyone else in that production were seasoned veterans who had done it, thousands of times. So I really had to, get my butt in gear and kind of, in a very short period of time, get my act together to be able to sing and dance and do what I had to do to pull it off, and it was great. It was exciting, and I think it came off pretty well.
You mentioned Streets of San Francisco, being on that. Tell us what that experience was like.
Yeah, that was it was great. I mean, it was a really great guest star part, and working with Carl Malden and Michael Douglas. And again, it was a real challenging thing, and I remember kind of, I was taking acting a lot more seriously, and it was a part that required a little more dramatic oomph, although in my early years, I did a lot of kind of dramatic things, but, I remember asking Carl Malden, I said, I got this real big kind of emotional scene, and I'm supposed to be, real upset, maybe cry, or, and he said, oh, come with me, And then he kind of took me to the back part of the set, and we started talking about acting and, sense memory and bringing up some emotional memory, and, I was like, yeah, I don't know if it helped, but I thought this is pretty cool, because Carl Malden is a pretty well-respected actor and a great actor, and I think I was more just stunned by that than maybe I absorbed some of his wisdom, but I thought that was very nice. It was great.
In '74, you did the series Sons and Daughters. So tell us how that came about.
Through the audition process, nothing is ever handed to you, and I learned that fairly quickly. Coming off of Sons, that I had to fight. For every part that I'd go on. I mean, you have to be good, and I took my parents' advice to be wanted to be good and know what I was doing, not just sort of act on instinct, which is what you sort of do as a kid. So yeah, I went through the whole first audition, second audition, screen test. My screen test, I remember very clearly over at Universal, Peter Falk, who was doing Columbo at the time, stumbled onto the set. Yeah, he was in his whole Columbo outfit, the raincoat and everything, and in those days nobody cared if he smoked or not, so he had a cigar, and he just decided to hang out and watch the screen test. And I kind of knew I had the part because the producer came up to me, but they wanted me to read with other people, and he said, I guess you noticed nobody else is here reading for your role, right? And I went, oh, okay, that's cool. So, and then anyway, so I'm doing the scenes, and then And then I came off, after doing a couple scenes with some people, and Falk goes, the kid's got talent. The kid's got talent. So I went, wow, that was another one of those fun things to kind of hear from him, because I loved him, just from Mad World and Pocket Full of Miracles and some other great movies that he was in. I wasn't all that big of a fan of Columbo, but I certainly thought he was a great actor.
So tell us the premise of Sons and Daughters.
Well, that was the anti-American Graffiti kind of thing, and that's, it was great, put together by tremendously talented people. It was an hour-long drama set in the 50s, about 4 friends growing up at a high school. And that was me, Gary Frank, Glynis O'Connor. We were the kids. We were the stars of the show, and of course there was parents. But it was very, very. It was trying to do a serialized story too, kind of like Peyton Place, and it was a season or 2 ahead of its time, really, because what followed in about a year or 2 after that was Roots, and what was the one with Nick Nolte and Peter Strauss? That became like
Thornbirds?
No,
Thornbirds with
no.
Rich Man, Poor Man.
Rich Man, Poor Man came out, and that sort of opened up the whole floodgate for shows that were week in, week out. Dallas, Knots Landing, Falcon Crest. They all kind of were, and so we were, a little bit before that. But probably more than anything, the show lasted a season. But at the same time, Happy Days came on in the same year, and Happy Days is what people wanted to remember about the 50s. It was kind of the American Graffiti light. And we were American Graffiti dark, and as good as it was and as dramatic as it was, it just wasn't what America wanted, and that's the way it goes sometimes.
Talk about working with Glynis O'Connor.
Oh, I had a big crush on Glynis. I thought she was so sweet, and I'd seen her in that film with Robbie Benson. I forget what it was called, their first film together. And I just thought she was so beautiful and so talented and so natural, and love unrequited, unfortunately.
And tell us a little bit about working with Richard Donner.
Well, Donner was crazy. Donner was big personality. We used to love to pull pranks, and he had a favorite saying, "Energy, energy, cut 10 minutes out of it. Energy, energy, cut 10 minutes out of it." He'd tell you where you're doing a scene. So you pulled a good prank on him once. I got a friend of mine, this artist, and I had him draw this giant poster of Donner on top of this woman. They were making love, and I brought him in and sat him down in a chair and had the lighting guys set this whole thing up. And as the thing dropped from the catwalk above and the spotlights came on, and he looks at this poster, and the caption in the girl's mouth says, "Energy, energy, cut 10 minutes out of it." So he thought that was very, very funny. And, but he loved practical jokes. He was a big personality, and it was no wonder he went on to kind of become an A-list director with all of the Lethal Weapons movies and the Superman movies and The Omen and all the other stuff he did.
You mentioned your first theater appearance with Skin of Our Teeth.
Uh-huh.
Tell us a little bit more about that, about touring with it and being on Broadway.
Yeah, it was another one of those real kind of crazy things. I got it in my head. I want to go to New York. I just finished Sons and Daughters. My agent thought it was nuts because I had just starred in a CBS series, but I said, I want to do theater. I'm going to be a real actor. And so I went to New York, and I, crashed at my uncle's place, and I was going to take a week or 2 to get set up. And while I was there, met with an agent. He said, I got an audition you can go on this afternoon. And I said, oh, okay, great. I'm not really set up here, but terrific. And it was to go meet Jose Quintero, who was, Quintero's one of the huge directors of Broadway, brought all of Eugene O'Neill's plays, created Circle in the Square, but directed all of the great Eugene O'Neill plays and made him the popular icon that he really is still. And so he was legendary, and I was, wow, okay, so. And I knew it was Skin of Our Teeth, and so I got the play, tried to read it as fast as I could before I went in on the audition, and then I get in there, and of course, he just wants to talk to you, just sits and talks, and I thought, I'm going to do a reading, or, is anything going to happen with this? And eventually, we chat for 5-10 minutes, and then it was like, well, thank you for coming. I thought, oh, great, I really blew that, but then, I went back to my uncle's place, and the answering machine, you know, the red lights blink, 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 and I hit the button. They go, well, Barry, you know, you've booked this Skin of Our Teeth, and, you know, they want to book you for that, and it's, you know, opening at Kennedy Center. It's the first of the bicentennial, huge production. You're going to tour the East Coast, go to Broadway, and I was like, wow, you know. So that was stunning that that happened quite like that without reading for something, you know. And I went, I think I can do this. I guess I can do it. And, you know, it was trial by fire, you know. I got into it, and Elizabeth Ashley was the hottest thing on Broadway at that time. She had just done Cat on a Hot Tin Roof and won the Tony Award, and Alfred Drake and Martha Scott, who was the original Emily in Our Town, and the Skin of Our Teeth is a Thornton Wilder play. She was in it, so you know, it was this very prestigious production. So it was, you know, I was spoiled, you know, getting into something that quickly, because, you know, when it was all said and done, then I was unemployed for a while after that.
So during this sort of post My Three Son era, what drew you to a role?
Just work, you know. There was no like, you know, I just wanted to do good work, you know, and but I did a lot of bad work too, you know, not bad, but I mean, you did a lot of commercial work, because, you know, I knew I was an actor, and I didn't have the luxury of picking and choosing. You know, you hope for good work and good work being offered to you, but I was realistic that, you know, I said, man, what I am, I'm not a star. I'm not, you know, Robert Redford. I knew that right off the bat. Although that was an era where you had hope, because character actors in, you know, the mid '70s were all becoming the new stars, the Al Pacinos and the Dustin Hoffmans and the Warren Oates and Gene Hackman. They weren't Paul Newman and Robert Redford. You know, there was a new breed of actor that was getting a shot at being leading men. So, you know, I mean, I had hopes for some, you know, breaking through, maybe doing some other work, and you know, but some came, some didn't. You know, that's the way it was.
So you said there was a period after that where there was a bit of a lull. Talk about that time. Is that a good word for it?
Lull. Oh, that's a nice euphemism for being unemployed. Yeah, I was unemployed but you know, there wasn't a year that went by that I didn't act. From the day that My Three Sons went off, there wasn't a year where I just didn't do anything at all. I either was doing theater, or I got in episodics, or I did, you know, TV movie or something. And, you know, in every decade, from the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s, you know. But, yeah, it was a transitional time for me as an actor, because, you know, I was in my mid to late 20s, and I still kind of was looking kind of young, but I was starting to lose my hair, and I was like, you know, and it was in an era when there were all those serialized Falcon Crest and Dallas, but those were, strangely enough, all older actors. It wasn't a youth-driven market like it is today. Everything is, you know, it's young is you're way better chances of getting work than it is being older today. And it was the opposite then, is that if you were older, in your 30s, 40s, 50s, John Forsythe and all these guys, you know, they were working like crazy. So my agent was going, you know, it's just not that much being done with younger people, really. That kind of changed probably around Animal House, you know, really. That was kind of almost one of the first kind of young, kind of gearing up towards a youth market, and in a certain kind of body, outrageous way. And but, you know, like I said, I kept busy. I worked, you know, did Heart to Heart and Simon and Simon, and worked on some films, you know, in the background. Worked on The Stuntman a little bit, you know, just post-production stuff, and started to write, you know, because I was going, I got to try to do something to maybe write my way back into the career. So it's, you know, it was challenging, but not like totally devastating. And but yeah, you know, you if there's any lost weekend period of my life, that was probably during the time that in the 70s, in the 80s, drugs were everywhere. You know, in fact, if you weren't doing drugs, you were probably considered a square. You were on the outs. You know, it was hard to believe, but that's the truth. And in that era, you know, if you weren't trying to be Jack Nicholson, and if you were trying to be Fred McMurray, you missed the boat. You know, that's not where Hollywood's head was at that point, and you were doing yourself, strangely enough, a big disservice by not being a partier. And
Did you think you needed to reinvent yourself as an actor?
yeah, I mean, you know, you always hear that, reinvent yourself, and you go, I don't know, I'm like Frankenstein. When am I going to start? You know, put a new head on or something. I don't know where. But actually, I did get a new head got put on. In fact, Mother Nature took care of that for me. And oddly enough, as I became more and more comfortable with the fact that I was not going to be, you know, have a full head of hair, and that took a little bit of, you know, adjustment. I started to work more because I just got more and more roles as doctors. I mean, probably the real breakthrough for me was the part what I played on Doogie Howser, where I had a recurring role as Dr. Rickert, and up to that point, you know, you always play the young guy, the kid, the goofy college student who can't, you know, get the girl, and you're always the guy in the story who never has the answers. You're always, you know, always asking the star, like, gee, you know, how do you really get, you know, what do I have to say to get a date, you know, and of course the star always gives you the information. As I got older, you know, and in Doogie Howser particularly, I was the expert, you know. Doogie was the kid, and I became, you know, finally an adult. I mean, played an adult who knew more than the other guy, and I think that was, yeah, if you have to put a point in your career where you went, that seemed to be a real turning point. That was it, because I was finally hired to play an adult and a doctor, an expert in something, and then, you know, kind of led to more roles like that.
Did you give any advice to Neil Patrick Harris as the older
I said go to New
actor?
York. I did. I gave him Roddy's advice, and I don't know, I'm sure he got lots of advice, and probably maybe the same advice from more people that he felt, you know, even more swayed by. But I do recall saying, you know, here's what I did. You know, I said, I went to New York, you know, I went and tried to become, you know, as good as I can be as an actor, and I think that's a great place to grow up and transition, you know, from being famous as a young man or young teenager or whatever he was. So, yeah, you know, I'm not taking credit for it, but he actually did Rent, and it's done pretty well.
So in '82, you were involved with a repertory theater in Los Angeles with John Cassavetes and Martin Landau. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
You know, that was another heady kind of great thing to be involved with, because the people involved was Peter Falk, again, was one of the Jenna Rollins and John Voight, and it was 3 plays John Cassavetes wanted to do, one of which he wrote called Knives, and the other 2 were written by a guy named Ted Allen. It was The Third Day Comes, which John made into a movie, and Love Streams was the one that John made into a movie. And anyway, yeah, it was repertory. It was you know, anybody could really be a part of it. If you were in Martin Landau's acting class, they were pals, and you just kind of went, you know, you're in. But literally, anyone who walked through the door, if you showed an interest and said, you know, I'll clean the floor, I'll help build sets, I'll do whatever I can. If I can be in the play, John would, great, I'll write you a part. You know, it was that easy. That's how he was, and great. You know, I mean, God, you know, it was just suddenly with watching the creative process of an American icon and an outlaw director. You know, watching, and he was very generous in sharing everything that he had, including his drugs and alcohol, but mainly his wisdom. You know, and that was. That's what it was about, was watching his process and seeing how some people loved it. John Voight hated it. You know, Marty Landau quit. He couldn't take it. Jenna obviously was married to him, couldn't quit. And they had huge battles and enormous fights, which was always very dramatic. Nick Cassavetes, who's now become kind of a preeminent director on his own right, was in a couple of the plays. So, you know, it was just bearing witness to the creative process of somebody I admired a lot.
Excellent. We're going to stop there and change tape.
All right.